Hey there, welcome to a special bonus weekend edition of Drummer Daily. Every weekend I publish, just for subscribers, the audio version of my free weekly drum clinic that I do live over on Facebook. This is a special bonus just for you for subscribing to the podcast. And so I hope you enjoy this. And if you'd like to join me live weekly for these drum clinics, please check out facebook.com/thedanielhadaway. That's where I do the live broadcasts every week. But I hope you enjoyed this audio only version of my weekly drum clinic. Well, hey everyone, I am doing this like I thought I would. Hopefully, all this stuff will keep working. I've got this camera here. My big thing is that I gotta remember to mute this microphone that I'm using. It's my built-in laptop mic, so you might hear me click around a little bit. But I need to remember to mute this mic whenever I play the drums. And so I've also got this camera over here that gives you a little better view of what I'm playing. The video is a little choppy right now, but hopefully it'll still be usable, and it'll give you a better view of what I'm playing. Now, a couple of things. I'm kind of limited right now based on the cable length connecting my other camera to my laptop. And so hopefully in the next week or two, I'll get some different cables, which will also allow the video to be a little less choppy on the other camera. But just to let you know, I'm going to do my best to kind of handle all of this by myself. We'll see if it doesn't work for some reason. And I expect there to be some hiccups. So just bear with me. I'm sure that at some point something will fail, and I will do my best to recover from it. I've also got I've got my iPhone sitting over here on my laptop so that I can see your comments and questions. So please ask away, and I'll get to them as much as I possibly can. There's a little bit of a delay between what I'm saying and what you're seeing. So just know that if I don't answer your question right away, I will get to it as soon as possible. Now, today, until I get some questions, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. One thing is, I wanted to point this out to you. I'm going to go back to the other camera here. You might notice right here, I'm missing crash cymbal. That's just because the crash cymbal was in the way of the camera, and I thought that I'd rather sacrifice a cymbal so you can kind of see and get a better view of what I'm doing than me have this extra crash cymbal that I may or may not actually use. Because most of the stuff we might talk about is going to be probably groove based and not super flashy technical stuff. That being said, just in case you haven't ever hung out with me before on one of these live things, just know that I am not a super crazy chops guy. So if you are looking for like crazy stuff around the drums, you're probably not going to get that here, just because I can't do it. But I love talking about groove, still love talking about technique and how we can use our hands and use our arms and wrists and everything like that. These things don't have a scheduled end time, and so this will basically last as long as we can go, as long as the questions are there, and I've got stuff to talk about. So with that all being said, I think I'm going to get into kind of the first topic that I thought I'd talk about today. I know that if you've listened to my podcast recently, or even in my newsletter, I mentioned my disdain is not the right word, but I definitely feel like a lot of guys overplay on the hi-hat. That they just beat the fire out of the hi-hat without thinking about it, and it's always so loud. Now this hi-hat that I have here, right now, I let a friend borrow my other hi-hats, my Zildjian ones. So these are actually old Sabian AAX stage hats that I have. And when I got them, they were super bright, super just over the top. They were good for like metal, like really, really loud rock songs and stuff like that. Really bright, really brittle, really harsh. Thankfully, as you can kind of see, there's about 20 years of dirt and grime on these guys, and so we're not quite so bright anymore. We're a little dirtier with this now, and it's actually really nice. I noticed the other day when I was playing with these because I had to. They're really good for like kind of funk stuff like that. And so it's got a really nice tight sound. Hey Timothy, I'll answer your question in a second. Thanks for asking. But what I thought we'd talk about a little bit is I know we talked about hi-hat, not playing it too loud before, but I want to show you what that looks like, and then I also want to talk about kind of how sometimes with the hi-hat, we tend to fill in every note, and we really don't have to. What I've realized is that as music listeners, a lot of times we actually as a listener, we actually fill in a lot of notes that in our minds, we fill in a lot of notes that the hi-hat specifically may or may not actually need to play. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here in a second. But first things first, I kind of want to show you a couple of contrasting ways of playing the hi-hat. And I'm going to show you first kind of how most guys play the hi-hat, and then I'm going to kind of switch to the way that I like to play the hi-hat. So I'm going to mute my talking mic, and let's see if this all works. And then, like I said, this video on this camera is a little choppy sometimes, and so I apologize, but hopefully in the next week or so, I'm going to have some better equipment to take care of that. But I still think you're going to be able to see what I'm playing. All right, so first I'm going to kind of show you how guys normally play the hi-hat, and I'm going to kind of show you how I play the hi-hat. So here we go. First, most guys play in the hi-hat. Here we go. All right, so that's kind of how most guys play, and there's nothing like inherently wrong about maybe playing like that from the surface. But if you were a mix engineer or a sound guy and you hear that, you are going to be you're going to have a lot of problems with that, because there is nothing, just to let you know, there's not a hi-hat mic on this setup right here. That was, if you're hearing that, that was just bleed through other mics, and then I do have some overhead mics. So there's nothing you can do to control how loud those hi-hats are. If you want to turn the hi-hats down, you're going to turn down the overheads, which has other drums coming through, or whatever else it might be bleeding through. So you have no control. And so for me as a drummer, I like to always think about how can I give the drums every opportunity possible to sound good in the sound system or on in the studio or whatever. How can I give the drums every chance to sound good? Because if the drums sound good, it actually makes me look better. It makes me sound better. It makes me come across as better if the drums sound good. And I'm not just responsible for tuning the drums. I'm also responsible for how they come out. So I'm going to kind of show you, the first thing is I'm going to kind of show you how I like to play the hi-hat a little more subtly. And like I said, I've never had a sound guy say, hey man, can you give me more hi-hat? And so I play with kind of that thought in mind. But here is kind of the way that I like to play the hi-hat, and you can kind of compare and contrast that with what I just showed you the first time. All right, so as you can kind of see, hopefully from that, I don't know how it came across in the mics, but hopefully you can kind of see that way was a lot more subtle. It wasn't as aggressive and just hammering through every hi-hat hit. But for me, I almost like to play the hi-hat so quietly that if I were to accidentally drop a couple of hits, like I'm playing so quietly that maybe like I flub it up a little bit and the sound doesn't come out. I barely hit the drum at all. It's okay because like I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to show you here in a second another example of this. The hi-hat, especially for a listener, when you're playing with other instruments, all the little subdivisions, the little ticky things that kind of go in there. If any of those are missing, especially just a couple random ones, our minds still fill it in as a listener. And this is something that I've learned by watching other drummers play, especially like they play like 16th notes in the hi-hat. They're doing something kind of more dancey. I'll show you what I mean here in a second, but I'll leave notes out completely. And actually, I've noticed recently, listening to a lot of pop music, especially, you'd be surprised how many times there's just no hi-hat in the part at all. It might be an acoustic guitar part filling that in, or something else, but it's definitely not a hi-hat. And so I'm going to show you kind of something that I like to do. I'm going to show you a pattern where I'm going to leave some hi-hat hits out, and then I'm actually going to come back and talk about something else that has to do with, sorry, I'm fixing my phone here so I can make sure I see your comments. I'm going to come back and talk about another aspect of what I'm playing for you that I want to point out as well. And then I'm going to get to some questions that I see here in the comments. So please feel free to ask away still, and I will definitely keep answering them. All right, so let me switch this camera over here, and I am going to show you what I'm talking about kind of leaving some hi-hat hits out of a pattern. And this is going to be a different pattern too. Here we go. All right, so as you probably noticed in that pattern, there was a lot of missing notes, a lot of stuff that I left out on the hi-hat, especially with my right hand, with kind of like the downbeats and stuff. And obviously, when I moved my hand over to hit the snare, that was missing as well. And so you can play with that because the hi-hat doesn't have to be there all the time. And what's really cool about this technique is, as a drummer, like I love the idea that we have so much control as drummers to dictate the dynamic of a song, and that can be good or that can be bad. But what I like to think about is and even not just the dynamic, but the mix of the song. And so what I love to do is kind of play with that. Like, think about the fact that in this one part of the song, maybe I don't need to play the hi-hat at all because there's an acoustic guitar that's strumming. And sorry, kind of window pop up here. It's one of those things that 1 second, I'm getting there. Okay, you probably didn't even see that, but I did. Little hiccup in the live broadcast. But maybe in this part of the song, you don't even need to play the hi-hat because the acoustic guitar is cutting through super bright in the mix, and that high end of that acoustic guitar strumming is really all you need. Is really all that needs to be there as far as rhythmic kind of crispness and keeping the subdivisions going. And this really works well. If you play at church, worship drummers especially, nothing against guitar players, but a lot of acoustic guitar players love to rush the beat. And it may not come across as rushing the beat if they're playing by themselves But when the drums come in and they're constantly ahead of the drummer just a little bit, of course it can drive us crazy as drummers. But also, what can happen is if we start subdividing, playing the hi-hat, and we're actually playing the same kind of rhythm, maybe eighth notes or whatever it is, as the acoustic guitar, people can start hearing that separation of start hearing the separation between the hi-hat and the acoustic guitar rhythmically, where it lines up. And so what you start hearing is flams, between the hi-hat and the acoustic guitar. You start hearing blah, 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 blah. If at best, if the acoustic guitar player is really crazy, you might end up hearing something way worse than that. But all that to say, as a drummer, I have control and I have the awareness. Of knowing, hey, that other person is rushing. I maybe don't want to rush, but I have the control and the awareness to dictate the situation in order to be able to say, you know what? If that person's rushing and my hi-hats are just going to make it even more obvious that they're rushing, maybe I don't play the hi-hats for that reason. Maybe I stay off the hi-hats, even if sonically it'd be okay to play them. If I stay off and let them kind of play by themselves, it gives them a little more space to kind of dance around the rhythm without my correct, quote-unquote, hi-hats showing everyone how wrong the acoustic guitar player is. So I don't mean to harp on this too much, but it's just something that I see a lot of people mention. All right, so one more thing about that pattern. I'm going to play this pattern one more time, but this time I'm going to point out not only do I leave out notes, but I also accent notes in a different way, and it's hard to hear this without other instruments. But I think that what I'm going to try to show you is there's still room in the rhythm, even if we are playing some sixteenths or kind of filling in a little bit with the hi-hat. There is still room to kind of add some interest. And I just think the best way for me to explain this to you is to try it. Now, I don't have any... I learned this yesterday when I was testing this live broadcast. If I play any copyrighted music on this broadcast, Facebook will delete the recording of it. So I don't want to do that. So I can't really play along with any music. Maybe next week I'll have a click track in at least so you can hear that. But I want to show you what I'm talking about, and then you can kind of try this with your own group or with some other music when you get a chance. So I'm going to switch this camera over, and I'm going to show you that same pattern, but I want you to pay attention to the accent pattern on the hi-hats to kind of hear what I'm doing with kind of some interesting placement of those accents. And then I promise you guys, as soon as I'm done with this, I promise you guys that I will get to your questions. I see some great questions on here, and I am definitely going to answer those. So I'm going to play this pattern. Pay attention to the accents, and then I'll get to some questions. All right, here we go. All right, so as you can hear, I definitely, at first, I personally forgot to leave some of those hi-hat hits out. But I did a lot of accents, and what I tried to do is not only just, I didn't try to just keep the hi-hat quiet and then accent certain things, but I kind of tried to ramp up to those accents and kind of dive back down. So it kind of, instead of having the hi-hat go, I kind of have it go up and down and up and down, so it kind of ramps up the accents and then ramps down. What you do with that is you let there be a flow to the rhythm. And once again, it's the same idea as not hammering out the hi-hat, is if you just kind of keep it smoother and low, you add some organic feel to it. Because I feel like, I talk a lot about playing with a click track, but a lot of times what guys do when they hear a click track is they try to lock in with it so hard, they don't think about the dynamics of what they're doing with that click track, and it ends up just sounding like the best you can do is sound like a programmed drum machine. And I know we don't want to sound like that. So the way that I've managed to kind of integrate feel in with actually playing with a click or playing with a band is by doing those, I almost call them micro dynamics, for lack of a better word. I'm sure there's somebody else who's talked about this before and has a better word for it. But that's what I call it. Okay, so now I'm going to get to some questions because I want to make sure that this is interactive. And so I am reaching over here and scrolling down so I can see some questions. Okay, Timothy, I see your question. I believe that's the first one. Hey there, Abhinav. I hope that's how you pronounce it. I see you said hi. I want to say hi back to you as well. Okay, so Timothy, you said, don't know if you can cover this today, but how low do you tune your floor tom when playing contemporary worship? My church has an 18-inch floor tom, and it is so low that it sounds like a concert bass. They also put 7 pieces of moon gel to muffle it. It all just seems off to me. I totally get you. That's a great question. With an 18-inch floor tom, this is a 16-inch over here. Let me change the camera here. This is a 16-inch floor tom over here. You can kind of see, I don't know if you can see, it's behind this mic, but I'll take it off and show you. All I have for muffling on this tom, and you've heard it, is just, I have this, hold it up to the camera here. It's this Snareweight M80. It's not focusing, doesn't want to focus, but Snareweight M80. It's a little piece of leather, and so I put that on the floor tom. But that's all I've got on here. Let me see if I can mute this mic. I'm going to hit the floor tom a few times just to let you hear how low it's tuned. And then we'll get back and I'll talk about it a little more. Here we go. Here's just this floor tom. And let you hear it without the muffling too, just so you can hear what that sounds like. It's going to be a little ringier. It might even kind of dive bomb a little bit, but I want you to hear what that sounds like. So I'm taking the muffling off now. I'll let you hear that. All right, so that's kind of how it sounds. I want to also mention, I'd love to ask you or have you think about if your drum sounds like a concert bass drum and you got to muffle it that much, I'm wondering if you've got a really thin head on it. I don't know, because it sounds to me like you've got way too much resonance. And if the drum is sounding low pitched, and then you've also got an issue where it's resonating so much you got to put so many moon gels on it. I'm wondering if maybe the head thickness is a problem. It might be too thin of a head, and a thicker head might solve that problem. Just a thought. And the other thing is, as far as tuning, how low I tune it, I know that mics can change things, so I know that maybe that didn't come across very well in this broadcast. But I just wanted to mention that in general, I tune drums a little higher to the ear than what I intend for them to end up sounding like at the end of as the end result. And so, without hearing the drum, it'd be hard to tell you. But I would just say that it's interesting to me that the drum is both being muffled a lot and then also is too low. Normally when people have to muffle drums, it's because they tune them up a little higher to be a little more resonant, and then the muffling offsets the higher tuning. But if it's an 18-inch floor tom and it sounds like a concert bass drum, it makes me think that there's just too much, when you hit the drum, there's too much mass moving, that's why I think maybe the head's too thin. Also, I will tell you that something I know that some guys like to do, and this is something unique, to help control that resonance as well, if the top head isn't too thin, is the bottom head. Put like a pinstripe or something on there, or something thicker on the bottom head. I actually used to have a coated Emperor, I think, which is a 2-ply head, on the bottom of my floor tom. So put a thicker head on the bottom too. There's no rules about what you can and can't put on there. I know it's tough though to experiment with drum heads because drum heads are expensive. But if you buy a head like a pinstripe or something that you put on the bottom, if it doesn't work out, you can use it on the top. And so that can be a great alternative. So hopefully that helps a little bit. All right, so Corey asks, do you change your snare drum during a live performance? And do you use a variety of snares for the studio or change the sound by heads, muffling, etc.? Great question. So I will say that live I don't change snare drums. I stick with what I've got, and I actually don't tune my snare drum either. I do have these guys. Let me get over here. I do have these guys, that almost every drummer feel like has now, big fat snare drum and the donut, and so I'll use these. I actually find though that I use these guys more often recently on the floor tom for unique situations than on the snare. I do like the big fat snare drum for recording sometimes too, but I don't really change drums when I'm playing live, and I don't change tuning when I play live. I kind of stick with what I've got. I do change muffling a little bit when I play live. And let me see if this drum is tuned well. I might have lost a little tuning from hitting it. Let me retune this guy. Let me see. Well, I'm pretty good. So what I'm going to do, I will show you something that I like to do, and this is something unique, not unique to me, but it's something that I haven't really heard anyone talk about, is I like, and I've talked about this in the podcast too, but I like to use, especially if I'm playing live, I like to use the ring of my drum as kind of a fake reverb or a wannabe reverb. If I can control the length of the note coming out of the drum, then I can control the perceived reverb of it. Now, obviously, the ringing has to be pleasing, and it may not come across as pleasing on this video, but I do things like this, and I'm gonna show you what I mean. So I'm gonna play a little bit. I'm gonna play two different patterns. One pattern, get my leg over here. I'm gonna play one pattern that is tight and short with all the muffling, and then I'm gonna change the muffling. And I'm gonna play something that kind of embraces that other the ringier version of the snare. So let me see here. I'm gonna mute this mic, and then we'll try it out. Switch to the ringier version and see what this sounds like. Actually, I'm going to take all the muffling off this and just see what happens. See what happens. All right. All right, so that might have been a little annoying, that ring, because of the way I have it tuned right now. I think that if I was planning on doing that, I would probably tune it a little closer, and also I've played it a little bit so it's out of tune. But that's what I do live. I do things like that. I kind of change the muffling around based on the song. I do play with like the butt end of my stick sometimes without doing rim shots, because I do rim shots pretty much all the time, but I might not if I do that. As far as the studio goes, I would say that it's changed, because I don't want to sound like a sales pitch for this drum, but this A&F snare drum is so versatile that recently I feel like I've been playing it pretty much all the time. I can pretty much get any sound I want out of it, and it's just so easy to get there, and it sounds so good. It's easy to tune. And so most of the time I use this drum, but previous to this, I would definitely change drums around. I have it's over there in the corner, so you can't see it right now, but I have a Ludwig Super Light that I like to play with, and I've mentioned that before. I used to use that in the studio all the time, and it's definitely a good drum. And then I would do that, and then I have a friend who owns the studio that I play in a lot, and he has I don't know if it's a Black Beauty. I think it might be like the pork pie version of the Black Beauty. Strangely enough, I'm not much of a gear guy. I talk about gear a lot, but I just don't. I'm not very educated about what's this or that. I just kind of find something that sounds good and I play it. But hopefully that answers your question about kind of what I change, how I change things around. In the studio too, I will say I kind of take a no rules approach. Whatever we got to do to get that sound, that's what we'll do. And I'm also excited to try out the A&F the snares on this floor tom that I've got. They're turned off and they're loose right now, obviously. But this thing sounds pretty awesome when you tune it like a snare drum and then put those snares on, so that it actually sounds like a snare. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit, answers your question. Let's see here. I think that's it as far as questions right now. Feel free to ask some more. And thanks for joining me. I don't want these to always be too long because I want to make sure that everybody actually gets something out of these. And so I'm going to keep these short. That way I don't take up all of your lunch break or whatever it is. I'm hungry too, actually. But I'm going to do this every week. It may or may not be on. I plan on doing these on Friday as many times as possible. But coming up here this next little bit, basically this spring, it may not quite be possible for me to do it on Friday every time. So it might be on Wednesday like today or another day of the week, but I'm going to do it, and it's going to be simple and short. Sometimes I'll have things to talk about. Sometimes we'll just show up and hang out and chat drums and see what happens. But I want you to join me every week because it's a lot of fun. And if you haven't, this is my one promo, I promise, my one promo for this whole thing. If you haven't checked out Boom Click Bootcamp and you want to play drums with the click, or you want to play drums at church with backing tracks or anything like that, or you want to be a professional drummer, basically if a click track is a part of what you do as a drummer, I would love for you to check out boomclick.net. It's you can watch some free videos that kind of explain the philosophy and the idea behind Boom Click Bootcamp. There's 4 free videos over 4 days you can watch, but then the actual boot camp is 14 days, and it's a video course, but it's not like a watch me play the drums and then hopefully you like what you see or whatever. It's a tool that you can use and play along with, and so it's literally you put your headphones in, the video plays, you play along with the video, and over 14 days you get really great with the click track. So that's my one promo during this thing. And like I always say at the end of these videos, if you just now joined me or you're watching the recording, and there's a question you'd love for me to hear about, there's a question you'd love to hear me talk about, leave it in the comments below here, or I always will post a few days in advance of when I'm going to be doing these live. And so I hope this has been helpful for you. Thanks for hanging out with me. I will see you again next week. I hope the drums sounded good. Give me some feedback on that as well. If you see this after the fact, that say, hey, the kick, not enough kick, too much of this, too much of that. I want to make this enjoyable for you. But otherwise, thanks for joining me. We'll do this again next week and every week live. Thanks for hanging out. Thank you for the questions. It makes me feel great that you guys are asking some things, and I can hopefully give you a little bit of info on this. And if you're joining late, just check out the recording, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining me, and goodbye for now.